Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to another Saw Legacy discussion video. Now this has nothing to do with Saw Legacy in general. This has nothing to do with the story of the franchise or anything, speculative on what's going on in the movie as a whole. We really, at this point, at the time recording this, really don't know anything of what's really going to happen. We have this small plot synopsis that came out several months ago. We know a couple people who are going to be in the film, and there's just a lot of rumors flying around. So like I always say, just kind of take everything with a grain of salt. Make sure it's from a reputable news source, something like Bloody Disgusting or Shock Till You Drop or any of the other reputable horror movie news sources. Even I will give y'all up-to-date information when I see it and when I have the time to make these videos, just kind of updating y'all about everything. So even if you don't want to go out of the way to basically check as much as I do, then come back here, and whenever there's really big news, I'm going to let you guys know, and I'm going to give you direct sources to where you can go look at the article where I got the information, and that will usually be, the right thing. It's not going to be rumor, it's not going to be fan-made, it's going to be coming from one of those sources. But anyway, I wanted to take this video to talk today about the Saw franchise in general and its legacy at the box office. So, if you don't remember, a couple of years back, Saw actually became the highest grossing horror franchise of all time. Now, honestly, that's not necessarily the biggest of deals. Obviously, it wasn't necessarily the highest horror franchise of all time, considering the fact that a lot of other things have basically passed it up until this point. Just in general, too, it came out in 2004 and basically went into 2010. And around that time, even though it wasn't as strong as it was today, there was a considerable overseas presence back then, as opposed to some of the more established or even longer running series that have run throughout, I guess, the entirety of horror movies or even the box office, since they've been really keeping track. And back then, where in the 80s, 70s, and 90s, when they weren't necessarily keeping track or even had international runs for movies like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th or the Halloween movies or the Chucky movies or anything like that, it was really kind of an unfair comparison. But ever since then, most of those movies have either come back or in the process of coming back, and other movies have definitely passed Saw to become, the higher of the horror franchise. More specifically, Alien Covenant came out this last week and made $36 million to beat Guardians of the Galaxy that had kind of won the last two weekends. And the cool thing about that is that not only did the overseas numbers do pretty well, that movie only cost $97 million to make, so it looks pretty likely that it will make some kind of a profit sometime in the home market release and streaming service negotiations, syndication deals, and everything that it might get. It's probably going to make a profit sometime down the line. So it's more than likely going to actually result in maybe a couple of years in another Alien film. But two Alien films like Ridley Scott wants to do, probably not, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But anyway, so Alien Covenant basically opened up this last weekend with about $117 million internationally, or I guess worldwide, and basically propelled the entire franchise to over $1.3 billion worldwide, and that's over the course of 8 films. Not only the original 4 Alien films, Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, but also AVP and AVP Requiem, Prometheus, and Alien Covenant. That's a lot of films for this particular franchise. Very long-running series. By the time all of this is said and done, if they get their next 2 films like Ridley Scott has been telling everyone for the last couple of years, even though now it could possibly be just one, it's basically going to be around a 50-year-old franchise. And obviously, even with the $36 million opening, even though that's down from Prometheus's $51 million, it still shows that there's a lot of interest and a lot of fan base and excitement for this really long-running series. So I'm sure Fox is really happy with that. But with $1.3 billion over the course of 8 films in 40 years, it put Alien over the top and made it the longest-running franchise and the highest-grossing horror movie franchise of all time. Not the longest-running franchise, but at least the highest-grossing and longest-running of the main ones. So with that being said, there's other movies that have in the last couple of years passed Saw in terms of, I guess, overall box office numbers. One being Resident Evil, which is more of an action franchise, like Alien's more of a sci-fi horror franchise, more of an action franchise, horror franchise with the Resident Evil. It's more of a game adaptation too. It doesn't really count to the biggest extent, and at the same time, with the Hannibal Lecter franchise with $915 million. Also, kind of more of a, I guess, kind of really a lot more of a horror movie, but not always. It's more of a thriller, not necessarily horror. That's why a lot of people were speculating, or people talking about Saw being, the highest grossing horror movie franchise, because it was horror, even though a lot of people thought, okay, well, it's actually a thriller, and I'm sure a lot of you who are big fans also go, no, it's more of a thriller than a horror movie, and I completely agree. But in terms of all these other movies, I mean, it's more geared towards that genre, that fan base than, Alien or Resident Evil or Hannibal Lecter. It's more true to the old school horror movie icon, movie anticipation and everything. The one movie that actually has gone over it is the Conjuring franchise, which I've said on this channel and multiple other channels before that it's one of those franchises that has basically been the start, I guess, of a cinematic universe of, I guess, horror movies, where you have the main films, then you have Annabelle, and they're also doing the Nun spinoff from the second movie. So we're just going to have to wait and see how that does. Maybe the new Annabelle movie basically bombs and crashes and maybe puts a stain on the entire franchise. I've heard a lot of people say that maybe they shouldn't even do a Conjuring 3, considering even though the second one was a decent film, there was kind of a creative downturn for that film, so maybe not they won't do it, they will do it. But those movies as a whole worldwide have made $895 million, and that brings us to Saw, which has actually made $873 million over the course of 7 films. And with Saw Legacy due out this October, I'm wondering, and I'm going to ask you guys, if whether or not it's possible for Saw Legacy to come out and actually make the $127 million worldwide to basically propel this franchise into the billion-dollar club over the course of 8 films. So not necessarily saying that would indicate a longevity or future of the franchise. A lot of people have speculated that that's probably not going to be possible. And as I've talked a lot on this channel before, the way that Lionsgate seems to be basically marketing or holding back on the marketing process of this particular film makes me wonder whether or not enough awareness, enough excitement is going to actually be built up. And probably when we're getting our first trailer or our first real look or anything in July, considering we're only going to have about 3 months to sell the film, I'm wondering if it's enough time to gesture that amount of anticipation, considering the competition that we're going to be seeing in something like October 2017. Usually a month that's not necessarily built up in such a way to be, I guess, overly competitive or overly I guess, filled with big potential films. But considering we have the 3rd Cloverfield movie, which the last 2, Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane, even though not directly connected, did very, very well for themselves, closing with $80 million and $72 million, I think, respectively. We also, this one set in space and probably a little bit more unique for everyone. So going up against something like that has a proven track record of both films opening over $35 million is something that maybe Lionsgate might be afraid of. And then at the same time, we have Blade Runner 2049, which could potentially probably, if anything is to go by, I'm sure the studio wants that film to basically take over that month. And we're just going to have to wait and see. I'm very skeptical about that film's prospects, and I'm not necessarily sure they will actually do as well as they want to. But at the same time, if it does better than anticipated, it might end up hurting something like Saw Legacy, even though it's much further down the month. Maybe like around 20 days or 21 days away from that particular film. But like I said, we're just going to have to wait and see. I'm not necessarily looking forward to such huge competition taking away viewers, butts in seats, and everything like that from Saw Legacy. I want this movie to do well, and I think, like I said, Lionsgate and Twisted Picture and all of them, I feel like they're sitting on it far too long. I understand why they're doing it. I understand that this works for the original films, but these films have been dormant for 7 years, as I've said before, and I will continue saying I don't necessarily think they're making the right decision. But what I will say that They do have millions of dollars put into this. I'm sure they have focus groups and they have everything. They know how to sell these things better than I do, so I'm going to trust them, and I can't wait to see everything that they bring us. But personally, a lot of people have been saying that this movie will not make $127 million, and it's going to have to wait for an inevitable ninth film in order to crack that billion-dollar mark. Regardless, that for a horror movie franchise, especially one as small as Saw was at the very beginning, this is incredibly, incredibly ambitious and incredibly successful for 9 films to crack $1 billion in the horror movie franchise. And none of this is Alien level, none of this is Resident Evil level. This isn't even Hannibal Lecter, that has the privilege of not only having a television show, which if you haven't seen Hannibal, please go watch Hannibal right now, it's really awesome, but an established book franchise and a very, very popular, even Academy Award nominated actor, and all this other stuff going into it, and all the excitement that brought with it going forward. So honestly, this is stuff that I'm just really looking forward to see. I don't necessarily know, or I honestly don't know, just to kind of give some prospect, around $127 million is about how much Saw 3D actually made. Saw 6 basically made $60 million, I think. I haven't necessarily looked at the numbers in a very long time. And I would imagine for most people who, I guess, following this or even remotely interested, who aren't necessarily huge fans but do watch the numbers, I'm sure that's what a lot of people are looking at and focusing on, is anywhere between like $60 and $75 million overall worldwide for Saw Legacy at the box office. And I feel like that's going to be an interesting number to look at going forward. Just a very long-range projection on my part. A lot of people are going to say that that's probably the most it can hope for, and I personally think that that might be true. Probably the most it can definitely hope for going forward, but at the same time, I want to see it do a little bit better. I would really like to see it do less so Saw 6 numbers and more so Saw 3D numbers, just to kind of ensure that we're not only getting that 9th film, but also propel the entire series forward into that billion-dollar club and make it more of a prestigious looking franchise, even though it definitely already is. Let's give it that bump. If you're a fan, I hope you're looking forward to this film, and I hope that you will help this film make as much money as possible and potentially even get $1 billion at the worldwide box office through its 8-film run. And hopefully you're excited about this. If you are, please make sure to rate, comment, subscribe for more Saw news and discussions and everything going forward. And I hope you guys have a good day.